Good afternoon. I am Don Pope Davis, Dean of the College of Education and Human Ecology at The Ohio State University. Welcome to celebrating Ann Lowe, an event honoring the legacy of Black fashion designers in America. Last September, the New York Times ran an article entitled "The Incredible Whiteness of the Museum Fashion Collection." It outlined how Black designers have been overlooked, underpromoted, and underutilized. The end result, the article said, is that museum collections have very few clothing artifacts by designers of color, worn by people of color, or reflective of diverse cultures. At a high-profile Paris fashion exhibit last fall, out of 200,000 pieces of clothing, only 77 were created by Black designers. That's less than 0.5%. It is a problem for nearly every museum that houses clothing collections. It is rooted in a systemic cycle of racism that affects designers like Ann Lowe, Patrick Kelly, and continues to impact current designers like Sergio Hudson and Virgil Abloh. And it is a problem we want to address here at the College of Education and Human Ecology. So, when we were invited to have our donors purchase an Ann Lowe dress donated by Jim Gessner to the Tri-Village Trading Post thrift store in Marble Cliff, Ohio, we jumped at the opportunity. The gown is a fitting addition to our historic costume and textiles collection and to the college. A primary goal of the College of Education and Human Ecology is to promote equity across all of our academic areas. This gown and Ann Lowe's story allows us to reflect upon the contributions that so many people of color have made to American history and to the fashion industry. It provides a valuable point of reference for our 532 fashion and retail studies students and many more people who will see the gown in our gallery and participate in other sponsored events in the future. We would like to thank Jim Gessner, his niece Elizabeth, her mother Susan, for their contribution. Our sincerest gratitude goes to Donna James and Linda Davis, who purchased the dress and donated it to our collection. Their generosity will allow us to commemorate Ann Lowe, her former business partner, Florence Cowell, and the work of other fashion influencers of color for years to come. We also want to thank Gayle Strege, curator of the Historic Costume and Textiles collections, for her effort in coordinating the purchase and donation of this dress. Thank you for this opportunity, and I now pass this on to Gayle.
Thank you, Don, and thank you to all our online visitors. Ann Lowe is the creator of our latest example of 20th century fashion design. I cannot stress enough how significant it is to have a dress designed by America's first Black fashion designer. As the Dean stated, Black designers, along with other people of color, are woefully underrepresented in fashion collections. And even though we've been working to correct that, it is difficult to do without resources. The primary way our museum collection grows is through unsolicited donations. And historically, our donors have been overwhelmingly white, resulting in representation in the collection that is overwhelmingly white. When we have resources to purchase artifacts for the collection, we actively target areas where there are holes in our representation. And within the past decade, we acquired 2 garments by Black designers to help fill those holes. In 2011, when clothing from the Ebony Fashion Fair became available at auction, we acquired a few pieces, including an evening gown designed by Eric Gaskins. Gaskins graduated with an art degree from Kenyon College in Ohio in 1980, and he received a fellowship to study in Europe, which led to an apprenticeship at Givenchy. After returning to New York, Gaskins began his own label for women's evening wear in 1987. 3 years later, he was singled out by the fashion industry's most influential publication, Women's Wear Daily, as part of the new crop of talented young designers on 7th Avenue. Following the economic recession, Gaskins closed his design house in 2009, but continued his biting and insightful commentary on the fashion industry through his alter ego, Fluff Chance, and the blog, The Emperor's Old Clothes, until 2017. In 2016, we added a second Patrick Kelly design to the collection, an animal print suit. Kelly was the first American designer of any race to be admitted to the Chambre syndicale du prêt-à-porter, which governs the French ready-to-wear industry. He moved to Paris in 1980, and in 1985, the first Patrick Kelly Paris commercial collection was featured in a 6-page spread in French Elle magazine. Kelly was interested in confronting racist iconography in his designs, particularly of the American South. He attempted to destigmatize racist memorabilia by reappropriating it, and was also a strong advocate for models of color. The suit joins a black wool dress with an Eiffel Tower design that showcases Kelly's signature playful use of buttons in his designs. As a child, Kelly used to play with the mismatched buttons his grandmother used to mend his family's clothing. Tragically, Kelly died in 1990 at the age of 35, after producing only 10 collections. He was one of the many casualties of the AIDS pandemic. Other garments by black designers in the collection include a Stephen Burrows pantsuit from the 1970s. He often finished hems with a zigzag edging, a technique useful for knits, but one he also used with woven textiles, usually in red thread. While initially a mistake, this edging creates a curling hem or lettuce effect that became his signature. Burrows became the first black designer to win a Coty Award in 1973, and he subsequently won the award again in 1974 and 1977. Also in 1973, Burrows was chosen as one of the 5 American designers and the only black designer invited to participate in the Battle of Versailles, a fundraising fashion show competition between American and French designers. The event marked a shift in the world of fashion from a focus on Paris to a focus on New York. Black filmmaker Deborah Riley Draper chronicled the event in her 2012 feature documentary, Versailles 73, American Runway Revolution. This menswear ensemble from 2000 by Sean John Combs is an example of how celebrities as fashion designers started to dominate the runways in the 1990s with a heavy use of name branding. Combs was already a well-known rapper, singer-songwriter, and record producer by 1998, when he used his name recognition to start the Sean John clothing line. The Council of Fashion Designers of America nominated Sean John for Menswear Designer of the Year in 2000. The line won the award in 2004. Before all these designers who came into prominence after the Civil Rights Movement, however, there was Ann Lowe blazing a trail. Fashion designers were not household names in the mid-20th century unless you were in Paris, and many women designers, unless your name was Chanel, were regarded as less than their male counterparts, at times dismissively referred to as dressmakers. Ann Lowe, like many dressmakers of the time period, made one-of-a-kind dresses, not mass-produced lines of clothing. She was a couture designer in the true sense of the word, making clothing that was made to the measurements of the client rather than to a predetermined size. Ann Lowe created couture dresses for elite high society debutantes and brides. Her most famous and influential dress was the 1953 wedding gown worn by Jacqueline Bouvier when she married future President John F. Kennedy. However, her name was not published at the time, though many were curious about the dress's designer. When asked about her dress's creator, Mrs. Kennedy replied that it was, quote, made by a colored dressmaker, unquote. Because Ann Lowe only made one-of-a-kind dresses, it also means that it is extremely rare to find surviving examples, let alone one available to a museum. When I received a phone call from Jimmy Manning, a volunteer at First Community Church's Tri-Village thrift store, saying they had an Ann Lowe dress and did I know who that was, I replied yes, but was admittedly skeptical. It was true, however, and the director of the store at the time knew this was an important piece, having gotten its story from Jim Gessner, who had donated it. Recognizing its importance, she thought the dress should go to Ohio State's Historic Costume and Textiles collection and hoped that we would locate a donor to purchase the dress and then donate it to Ohio State. Since proceeds from Tri-Village Trading Post support First Community's mission work, this solution would double the philanthropy and be a win-win for both. Because Ann Lowe's story is so significant to Black history and culture, I thought the most appropriate donor would be someone from the Columbus Black community. I contacted Donna James, who I knew as a prominent member of the community with an interest in the arts. She, in turn, invited her friend Linda Davis to participate, in part because of Linda's background in fashion design. Because of COVID restrictions, neither woman was able to see the dress in person. Instead, we made a video to reveal the dress virtually.
Hey.
Hi, how's everyone?
Donna.
Hi, Linda.
Yay. We made it this far.
Oh, it's been a journey.
It has. Well, it's nice to see you guys in sort of person. So happy to have you involved in this whole process. This has been really exciting.
I'm thrilled. I know Donna will speak.
Yes, yeah.
We've been high-fiving each other behind the scenes. Well, I think that Donna should go first.
I was going to say Linda should go first.
You engaged me, so I think in that order would be
All right, I'll go first.
fair and appropriate. And when I come back and you're crying, then I'll know. No.
I'm going to hide my face. Yeah. Okay.
No.
Here we go. Oh, that's so nice. Oh my goodness, look at that detail. Oh my God, look at that detail.
Oh, wow.
That is beautiful. Oh. Oh, I love it. Look at those lines. That's just amazing, the detail. And I know it was by hand. And it's so well preserved. It's just amazing.
I want to touch it. I want to hold it. I'm just blown away. It's so beautiful. Every aspect of it, every detail.
I am so happy to be a part of this. This is just exquisite. It is so unique.
She's amazing. She is amazing.
Simply elegant.
Oh, you're welcome. I love it.
Thank you, Ann Lowe. Oh.
Oh, wow. Gayle!
Awesome.
We did it.
I got chills. Yeah, we did it, didn't we?
Oh, yes. It's. I have chills too. I was speechless. I just had to study it every
I know.
flower, every leaf, every petal, every stitch.
And it's amazing how every delicate detail is so well preserved. I mean, the fabric, as fragile as it is, I expected to see some serious wear, and I couldn't really find any.
What fabric, Gayle? What fabric is it?
So it's a silk file. Most of the dress is a silk file, which is the sort of the more matte finish. And then the stems and the flowers are a satin, where you get that bounce of the light and that reflection.
Yeah.
So you get a real nice matte and glossy kind of contrast going on, even though it's tone on tone. So that gives it, a little more depth. So
well, tone on tone is so elegant anyway, right? It's so classy and sophisticated, and you can see that in the design of the gown too. It's not overdone.
Right.
No, it's very classic, right? In its shape and its presentation. And and I'm thinking that it probably was designed as a debutante gown of some kind, where you would really it would be a little more understated.
Yeah.
And especially in the later 60s, it was more minimalist kind of design aesthetic anyway. So it really fits into its time period.
So the time period that she was a designer, you think this would fit more into the 60s time period versus the 20s, or how do you gauge that?
So it's partly the style of the dress. It has that high raised waistline, which we started seeing again in the 60s. And because of the label and its history, that A.F. Chantilly label was really no sooner than 1966.
Okay.
So, and it fits in, and just stylistically with that. And I've learned more about the label and that history of it, because we knew that the dress came to Tri-Village thrift store from a man by the name of Jim Gessner.
That's what I wanted to ask you. So where is Tri? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Where is Tri-Village? Here?
Tri-Village, yes, it's in Marble Cliff. So it's First Community Church over in Marble Cliff. So they have a thrift store connected to the church that, the proceeds from the thrift store go to support their missions that they do, their philanthropic missions. And so, Jim Gessner and the whole A.F. Chantilly label, the A stood for Ann Lowe, and the F was for Florence Cowell, who was Jim's mother. And Jim was really the guy who set up the business. And so the story goes that his mother had seen the 1964 Saturday Evening Post article about Ann Lowe being society's best kept secret. And she went to her son and said, I want to work with this woman. And so he kind of quit he was working in the advertising business in Detroit, and picked up and went to New York and found a 4th floor walk-up on Madison Avenue, and that became the A.F. Chantilly location. And so his mother, Florence, did the dresses and the suits, and did the evening gowns. And we just got, so Robin Chenoweth here at the college was doing a podcast. And so she was trying to track some things down, and she just went to whitepages.com to see if she could find a Jim Gessner in the phone book, on the internet. And she just got in touch with him and talked to him directly, which led us to his niece, Elizabeth. And Liz sent Robin some images of Ann that had never been seen before, from promotional stuff that they were doing with that business.
Oh my goodness.
And also a brochure of the business that had a picture of Ann's evening gown and Florence's suits, and had the address of the location. So this is a chapter in Ann Lowe's life that nobody's published about. Nobody's heard about this portion of, this at kind of the twilight of her career. but
Right.
she was still doing debutante dresses in the late 60s. There are several of them at the Smithsonian, at the African American History and Culture Museum. So that have this A.F. Chantilly label. And so even the curators at the Smithsonian were really interested in finding out more and talking to Jim Gessner and getting this information because they don't have it yet. So that's just leading us, to uncover more of this story of this amazing woman's life.
So this would have been after she made the dress for Jackie Kennedy. Is that what really kind of put her in the spotlight, was the Jackie Kennedy dress? Because I had no idea that an African-American woman made her wedding dress. When I saw that, it just blew me away. Linda and I were like speechless.
Yeah, that was, again, one of society's best kept secrets here, because that wedding was 1953.
Yeah.
And at the time, Anne was a very well-known dressmaker among the society ladies, and Anne was very specific about who she would have as a client. She was very particular, so she only did ladies on the social register.
Smart lady. No. Hey, she was a businesswoman. She knew her niche.
Right.
She knew her niche.
Yeah, and I think because she was so interested in the art of the creativity that she really wanted to be able to do those one-of-a-kind pieces, that were those debutante and wedding dresses, that you could really have more of that freedom to do that. So, but yeah, so Jackie's mom knew about Ann Lowe, and Jackie's sister had used Ann Lowe for some different debutante dresses as well, and so they went to Ann for the wedding dress design, and it was, at the time, because I think even everybody wanted to know who had made Jackie's wedding dress, and her response, according to things that I've researched, said that she said, "Oh, it was a colored dressmaker made it." So not even mentioning Anne's
name, yes.
So, but yeah, so that's kind of the tragedy of that. But I think it was a fairly iconic wedding dress of the time, which would have just influenced so many other wedding dresses.
Yes,
that was going on. But yeah, that was so, and that was, I don't know that Anne had really gotten a lot of press until that 1964 article in the Saturday Evening Post. And
interesting.
I don't know if that was tying in directly with a lot of what was going on with the civil rights movement at the time, because that was 64. And then Ebony had done an article on her in December of 66. So, so that's kind of the biggest amount of press that she had gotten, but it was, a decade after she had done Jackie's wedding dress.
That's amazing.
Gayle, I have a little quick story as to one of the reasons why this has been so monumental for me personally. So my undergraduate degree is in design and from the and retail, retail and design. So that combined fashion and design and also some interior design work. But my passion at the time was fashion. And so after I graduated with no money or etc., I found a way to take myself to Paris, France, to a workshop there. And in that workshop, it's a fashion workshop. I have the book right here still. Okay, I brought it out at the fashion workshop. It was a month long. We went to Kenzo and Yves Saint Laurent and Thierry Mugler and many other, at the time, Ralph Lauren had a small studio. Even though he's an American designer, he had a very kind of brand new studio in Paris. This was in 1980. And there were no African American, no brown, no designers of color whatsoever. And I was so young at that time. It didn't, I don't want to say I didn't think about it, but I was just absorbing all of the design content I could at that time. But I, after Donna brought this, and you brought this dress to me, and we did our research, we all have, and Ann Lowe died in 1981. So that was a year after I was there, but I didn't even know about her, if you think about that. I didn't even know about her. So she'd already lived this life, designed these beautiful gowns for women all over America. I go, to the epicenter of fashion, and not one peep about, her. So this for me is just heartwarming. I am kind of getting to go back and relive that period and bring it forward, so thank you again. I'm so happy to be doing this. Yeah.
My pleasure. And it seemed that Anne had some of that publicity in the 60s, and then it's like she dropped off the face of the earth and nobody, heard about her again. And it's, recently there have been some students that have been doing some graduate work on her, and more research is done, and more people are covering her in some of the popular press. And so that's heartening to know. But so hopefully she won't, disappear. And I think too with
not if we can help it, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I think with the Lois Kayleen Alexander, she or Alexander Lane, I forget which one's first, but she started the Black Fashion Museum in Harlem in 1979. And so she started collecting a lot of these African-American dressmakers and designers' garments. And
I want to write
these are the pieces that are now at the Smithsonian African-American History and Culture Museum that make up, and so a number of Ann Lowe gowns. So she was able to collect a number of those. So thank goodness that she started collecting when she did, and saved these things and kept their stories going, so that we're able to tell them today and share them with people, so that they haven't been lost to thrift stores or something. So
right.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. When I reached out to Linda and I described what it was, Linda got it. I knew she would, just at hello immediately, and then even helped me with kind of being in the moment and understanding that as African-American women, as Black women, supporting this woman now, some 40 years later, to make sure, to Linda's point, her history is not lost. And yes, there are other places like the Smithsonian and the Black Fashion Museum in Harlem, but now we've got a piece of her in Columbus, Ohio, which for us, I think is really special to be a part of that.
I agree. I completely agree. I remember learning again back in that period of time, back in 1980, about various stitch techniques. Again, my grandmother having done that, and I sat at her footsteps, and I knew about the basics like basting and things like that. But Anne used a unique technique that made her gown so special. Was it called trapunto? Trapunto.
Yeah.
And that not everyone did that. I'm not sure if she invented that. I couldn't figure that out, but she definitely mastered it.
Yeah, and that goes along with so trapunto is kind of like a 3D applique. So whereas the designs in this dress are pretty much straight applique, flat on flat, the trapunto would be putting a little stuffing in behind it to give it even a little more dimensionality. And I think on some of her other dresses, you can see that. And also the use of the handmade flowers that you see on a number of her dresses to decorate that. So that, I mean, that was another kind of indicator when we were really trying to go through and validate that this really was an Ann Lowe dress, because of course I had never heard of this AF Chantilly label. I was like, is that for real? You know, because there's always, you know, this amount of skepticism going into this and thinking that it's like, okay, she didn't make that many dresses. And who's this label that nobody's ever really heard of before? But then when you go in and you compare her stylistically to the other dresses that are in the museums, at the Museum of the City of New York and at the Smithsonian, and then to find out that there were other dresses with the AF Chantilly Ann Lowe label that are in those museums as well. It's like, okay, well, that proves, you know, it's a valid label, and it certainly looks like other dresses that she did. So, and the techniques, you know, that are the same kinds of things that are there, which we can really sort of definitely say, yeah, this is her. And, you know, the fact that we've got, and I think I was telling Linda before that the fact that every dress Ann Lowe made was a one-off. It's a bespoke dress. You know, she didn't make two of a kind, three of a kind. They were all one-of-a-kind dresses. And so when you have this true couture made to a particular person's measurements, as opposed to making it to a size, you just don't have hundreds of dresses. You have a limited amount to begin with. So that makes being able to find one of these an even more rare sort of opportunity. And yeah, I don't know how many Ann Lowe gowns there are west of the Appalachian Mountains, you know. So so the fact that there's one here at Ohio State, and you know, we can share it with students and our community, you know, I think is just so amazing and so incredible. So
I think I have to say that one of the things I've loved most about Donna and being her friend is she is a true visionary in terms of art, and a one-of-a-kind gown such as this haute couture is bespoke, as you say also, Gayle, is art. It's a work of art, Donna. So thank you also for bringing me along to venture with you on this artistic project. Yes, this is great.
I was so happy to have a partner in good trouble, right?
good trouble, yeah.
Good trouble, bringing artistic history for an African-American woman to light with another African-American woman. It just seemed the best way to take the past and you kind of pay it forward. So thank you for joining me, sight unseen, trusting all the way that Gayle was taking us on a journey to something magnificent.
Oh my God, this leap of faith. You know, it's like, okay, I can't really show you what I'm talking about, but really trust me, believe me, it's for real. And yeah, and I just thought, that this would be such a great opportunity for this community and for the students and for the African American community here in Columbus as well, to have something that's so meaningful in our collection.
Yeah.
You know, so
well, I hope we can share this. I know with COVID, we're you know, everybody's hunkered down to stay safe, but I'm hopeful at some point we will get to tell this to the broader community, share it, and tell her story, because it is a phenomenal story. And Linda, with your background, just those little nuances, I had no idea about the stitching, and I knew you had a design background. I always knew that, but this is phenomenal insight for me anyway.
It's just nice to see. It's just nice to see and to own a piece of our history. You know, so much of the African American history and this still being African American History Month is, you know, doesn't fall on deaf ears. You know, it's so nice to own a piece of our history and bring it forward and expand it and give it credit and credibility and honor.
Yeah.
Well said.
I know I've been in touch with both Nanette Macy Junes at the Columbus Museum of Art and with Demetrius at the King Arts Complex.
Yep.
And Lynn there as well. And yeah, I would love to get this dress out into the community and kind of do a little tour around Columbus, because I think those sites are going to be a lot more accessible for people to visit than on campus here necessarily, because parking can be an issue.
Right.
And so they're very excited about having the dress come to their institutions as well. So I think that there'll be some real opportunity to share this broadly within our city. So, so I'm looking forward to when we can finally do that and get it out there, and where people can feel safely congregating together again. So, and I think, you know, there are just some real opportunities to do programs too. I know when I was talking with Liz Gessner, Jim Gessner's niece, and Florence Cowell's granddaughter, she was saying that they lived in Ohio, and of course Florence, her grandparents were living in New York, and she remembered a time when Florence came and had Liz help her cut out flowers and petals so that they could put them on an Ann Lowe gown. And I'm thinking,
Oh my God.
yeah, that, you know, sort of creating fabric flowers, you know, it's like getting children involved in the whole process. And you know, so I think there would be different program opportunities to get kids involved in creating, you know, some of their own fashions.
Their own designs.
Do that, right? So
Love it.
that would be a good
Love it.
time. So yeah, so neither of you guys had heard of Ann Lowe before,
No,
right?
I had
So
no idea. None.
Yeah.
And at first I was embarrassed that I didn't. And then I realized there's so much of our history that's lost. And there's so much of common, you know, Black history that's just not taught broadly. And you have to go find it. And so this found us, but no, had never heard of Ann Lowe.
No,
yeah,
nor had I. And I have 3 daughters, 2 sisters. I'm from a very female family, and very ladies who very love to dress, and you know, all of etc. And mention a little bit of my, you know, old self, old life. No, and I, again, with like Donna, I'm embarrassed to say I had not. And I've been to New York on several occasions. I've been to Harlem here and there, but I have a new destination. Next time I go to New York City, I will tell you. So, yes.
the well, and it's, you know, I think she, you know, suffered from not only, you know, being African American, unsung history, you know, that whole aspect of our culture, but just being part of fashion and dressmakers. And I mean, some of that at that time too was a more male dominated industry.
Yes.
And I know I've, you know, suffered it's like, oh, heard some designers talk about, oh, well, she's just a dressmaker, you know, so she's not a designer. I'm like, oh, what a snob you are. And it's like, because it takes the same amount of work and skill and creativity to put something together. And just because she may not have a huge financial backer behind her, you know, doesn't really mean that she isn't talented and doesn't know what she's doing.
Right.
So, you know, part of fashion being one of those, oh, that's just what women do, you know, that's not really important. So you have that sort of prejudice that you're working with at the time too.
Yeah, you're right. In our history across the world, men really did dominate the industry.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, definitely fighting that that sort of, you know, dressmaker versus designer prejudice as well.
Yes.
And
she also had a few economic issues that she had to
Yeah.
manage through, that depending on her skin color may have been a little different. It
Right.
doesn't say that in the history, but when she had to repurchase all the fabric to make
And
the
Jack.
bridesmaids gowns,
Mhm.
wasn't that it? And she, depending on her background, she could have maybe gone to a bank and borrowed that money, but she didn't. And why
Yeah.
not? And
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't easy to do back then, but
Right. Yeah. Credit for
Oh, yeah.
was just not something that was extended.
No, to women, period, much less an African American woman. I mean, the ability, and I can still remember when women couldn't borrow money on their own without a man co-signing
Mhm.
or signing.
right.
So the
Yeah.
whole notion, to your point, Linda, of being a businesswoman
Yes.
and having access to capital for her business, which even today is still a challenge.
It
Uh,
can.
for women and African American business owners and entrepreneurs. Interesting. Things change, and then some things are still the
Right.
same.
Yeah. So yeah, when I think of some of having the access to the capital, and I know when I heard about Anne's sort of dedication to the design work and the creativity, I immediately thought of Charles James, who's this American designer who did these fabulous gowns in the 1950s. Um, and he really considered himself more of an artist and sculptor as well, to the point where, he just didn't want to deal with the details of the finances. And,
Mhm.
but he was such a perfectionist in the construction of the clothing that sometimes he didn't finish his commissions for the ladies that he was, working for.
Oh boy.
Not a good thing. But it's sometimes the people who really are very creative and artistic don't necessarily have that business acumen as well. And I know that Anne, her son, kept her books for quite a while, but then he died in 1958 in a car accident. And so then she didn't really have that person that was her, financial partner to help with that and some of the expenses. So that, and that, could have been the male person that was able to help with some of that financing. Um, but yeah, it is. I do kind of think that she was definitely an artist, and I know in talking to Jim Gessner, he was saying that yes, she would finish her seams with French lace, and she did all of this stuff, and she never charged enough for her dresses, given all the labor that went into them. And to me, that kind of speaks to someone who really did it, for the love of creating and
Yeah.
making a beautiful thing. So, but yeah, it's doesn't always pay the bills.
Right. Yes. Her intrinsic satisfaction, that it was perfect and that it was exactly how she envisioned it from the beginning. Yeah, that speaks to her artistry for sure.
Yeah,
For sure. Hmm.
yeah. So I think she, yeah, definitely, um, had ideas when she was working with her clients to figuring out
Mhm.
what, was going to work for those, each of those women individually. So.
What about the story where she wasn't allowed to come into the front through the front door? Remember that part of the story? I've forgotten whose gown she was delivering,
Huh.
um, but she came to the door with the gown or gowns. I'm not sure who, I can't remember who, but they at first weren't going to let her in with through the front door and said, "Oh, you have to go around the back." And she said, "No, no, I will take the gowns back home with."
Yeah. Right.
And what strength she had to do that, because I imagine during that period of time that that was hard to do, to be that strong, and but that story made me recognize, or really kind of cling to her story a little bit, that she's just like all the rest of us. And
Yeah.
Is that when she was delivering Jackie Kennedy's gown?
were they Jackie's? It might have
I think
been.
it was when I read the story. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I don't remember who it was.
I remember this story of her delivering, but I can't remember which gown she was delivering. But yes, whomever's gowns they were, And then the story of her designing Olivia Havilland's dress for the Academy Awards, and the label being removed or changed.
Yeah, I think because that was she was almost like subcontracted, or she was like working. There was another person who was the designer or the manufacturer, the business, whatever, but Ann Lowe had actually designed that dress, but there was no Ann Lowe label in it. It was some other label. Yeah, and that was another one of those not noted who the actual designer of the dress was. And that, I think, was 1947. So that was really going
early.
back a few more years.
Yeah, that was early. Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, the book or the movie Hidden Figures, Donna and I, when we first, she's definitely a hidden figure.
Of a different kind. Yes, indeed.
yeah, another person that was just unrecognized.
Yeah.
Her accomplishments and her contributions, to what she was doing. So it's great to bring her out into the forefront and have her celebrated this way. So so we're really excited about doing that. So I'll have to ask you, what are your favorite parts about the dress that we have here?
Linda, you go first.
I love the fact that it is an empire waist. I remember my mom getting dressed for the Marine Corps ball. My dad was an officer in the Marine Corps ball. And that was the time in the 60s, when the ladies all wore, empire gowns and, and so I just like that shape, that silhouette. But what was different about hers that I noticed when she spun around, it didn't fall straight in the back. It had that gathering. So it kind of had an extra elegance, kind of an extra, I don't know. Yeah, but that's my favorite part.
I got lost in the flowers around the hem, and how they were soft like petals. And then the leaves or the petals that were on the dress and just sewn in sort of this sweeping, blowing. The dress had motion to it, even as it was standing still, because of the way the flowers and those petals or leaves were sewn onto the dress, and even some of them not sewn flat. They were sort of allowed to kind of be free and flowy, and then the tone on tone. I've seen some of her other dresses, and they can be very flamboyant with the color and how the flowers are to your and Linda's point, full, and how this was so subtle and as Linda said, so elegant. I could see someone wearing that. I could see my granddaughter wearing that, or one of Linda's daughters wearing that at a debutante ball. Yes, very tasteful, sexy in a sophisticated kind of way.
Yes, very rich looking.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I'm curious too. So Donna, when you first got my letter, what was your first reaction to to this crazy idea.
I had to read it 2 and 3 times to make sure I understood what was going on. And at first I thought, did she get the right person? Like maybe, you'd sent the letter to the wrong person. And then after I read it the 3rd time, I thought, oh my God, this is an African-American woman designer. They have potentially found a dress, and they need sponsors to underwrite the acquisition and the donation. And once I got it in my head, I went to my husband and I said, you won't believe this, what they're asking, what Gayle is asking me to do. And then I think I called you because I really wanted to confirm it was real, what was going on. But I was taken aback by it because I just thought they must have the wrong person. She's asking, am I the right person for this? So yeah, that was my first reaction.
Yeah, well, I think because, well, you had been my neighbor
Yes.
across the alley. And that, you also knew Roy Gottlieb, who was a friend of the collection here. So there was this connection, and I'm like, I'm going to get Donna to help me.
Right.
So yeah, even if you didn't think you were maybe the right person, it's like, no, she's going to be the person I get in touch with. Because, even if you weren't going to be the person to be the sponsor, I figured that you'd probably know somebody. And then you brought Linda along. So that was great. So Linda, what did you think when you heard about this opportunity?
Well, I was the same in some ways as Donna. She was able to translate a little bit of the journey, to me. But I kept thinking, is this true? Is this real? But I tell you what else, by then, some of the work that you do, Gayle, had been done, and you made us feel confident that you were going to take time to figure out, was this real? Was this true? Was this Our Lady? Is this really Anne? The lady we haven't met and are trying to, in some ways bring home again, And once I got that confidence, and through Donna, also having the confidence, I was like, I'm on board. Just tell me what the next journey brings, or next step of the journey brings. So
yeah, and this has been, it's been a crazy journey that's, taken a few months, but I, definitely wanted to be able to show you guys how good this dress could look, because our original pictures were just, here's this dress laid out on a table, she's got a few things that need to be repaired, but and then once we could get her in this form, that we could put her on a dress form and see her in all of her 3 dimensions, and how elegant she looks, just to be able to certainly share that. But hopefully, we'll be able to, you can come see her in person too sometime, whether it's here or whether it's at the Art Museum or the King Center or something. We definitely.
I even said to my daughters today, when I texted them that today was the day for, that we were going to see it, and I told them about, and one of my daughters and I were able to have a bit of a conversation, and I said, once we're able to see it, we'll go down, we'll go together, and maybe we'll have lunch near campus. We'll just, we're going to make an excursion.
Oh, definitely.
Of one gown, just, we're excited. So yeah,
there's so much history in the one gown, and I just imagine, Ann Lowe just feeling, I feel good, and would think, just channeling her spirit, to know that people still care about her and her work, and being part of that caring, lifting each other up, to the next generation, is just, that's what it's all about. And that's why I think Linda and I wanted to do this. To have 2 Black women supporting another Black woman, even though she's not physically here, to acknowledge her gifts while she was here.
and I just thought that, I really wanted this dress made by an African American woman to be supported and given by other African Americans in the community, because to me that was the most appropriate way of doing this.
Well, you did
So
good. Thank you for thinking about it that way.
yeah, I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen, and I think I met another friend in Linden now. So this is
Yes, Gail.
who's come into my life, who has an interest and passion
Oh, yeah.
in these kinds of things. So I think that's just so many good things coming out of it. So I'm wondering if you guys have any questions, if you're curious about anything with the dress or the process or anything.
Where I was curious, not only was this dress and Anne new to me, which is fantastic, but I wasn't aware that Ohio State had such a department with such depth in the area of fashion and I'm assuming also maybe costume design, or is it, tell me a little bit about that, Gail.
So our we have a fashion and retail studies program that has evolved out of the old home economics programs. So being a land grant university, the Ohio State had a home economics department beginning in 1896, I think is when they had a charter in the College of Agriculture or School of Agriculture. So it was all connected with agriculture and with what's the
Textile.
Extension, with county extension, and that's there's a lot of with extension agents. So it was interesting to me when I got here that, because I always thought of extension, OSU extension, or any extension at a land grant was all about helping people with their gardens and their trees and all of that kind of thing. But there's a whole aspect in home economics that's part of that as well. So what had started out as the cooking and sewing home economics back in 1896 has evolved into this fashion and retail studies program that we have now. And this collection, which now numbers about 12,000 or so pieces, had started out, earliest things we have were collected by faculty in the 1920s, and they were just used as things to enhance the coursework in the classroom. And the collection sort of steadily grew bit by bit. And we did in 1952 receive the collection from the Department of Theater that had some actual historic garments that they kind of gave to our collection here. And then in the early 60s, Mrs. Firestone had given some of her couture dresses to the collection. So she shopped at Dior and Balenciaga in Paris in the 1950s. And when she decided she wasn't going to wear those dresses anymore, she gave them to Ohio State here for the students to study in the sewing and design programs. So that is amazing that we've got some of those 1950s Dior's and Balenciagas from Paris. So she had a number of those things. And then pretty much the collection took off in the 1980s when Charles Clybacker came here as designer in residence. And Charles was he was a New York designer, had his own small business, sold to Henry Bendel's and Bergdorf Goodman's, had some different dress designs that he used, and then really became known in the later 60s as the master of the bias and the bias cut. So he did a lot of things similar to V&A, and the 70s was about some of that bias reinvented, from the 1930s. And he was charged with growing the collection here at Ohio State. And did that, did some exhibits, got involved with the community, raised some money to build the Geraldine Schottenstein wing for the collection here, the
Okay.
Historic Costume and Textiles collection. And so it kind of grew by some leaps and bounds while Charles was here really actively pursuing a lot of different people. He had connections back in New York, so he would connect with designers in New York, with Stavropoulos and Jimmy Galanos and some of these other people. So and he would actually write them letters and ask them to contribute to the collection here. So we have some of those pieces from those designers as well. And so it's been a really great resource to really look at the whole history of fashion as an industry. And one of the things that I've been doing here too is looking at the social history that's involved, like what are the stories that the clothes can tell. So beyond the fashion history pieces that we have are historic garments that tell us a little bit more about the people and the time in which they lived, what was available with the textile technology. We have some things that were dresses that were worn on the farm in Ohio. And so what was that life kind of like? I also, Charles didn't really collect a lot of menswear. So we had a really nice dress from 1760, but we didn't really have any menswear from that time period either. So trying to plug in those men's stories, because men wore clothes too. And especially as we get more men in our fashion program, they also want to see themselves represented in things we have in the collection. So we're able to tell a really good history of, the evolution of fashion for our history of 20th century fashion class. But we're also trying to tell those stories of women's dress reform in the 19th century, or what kind of clothes did children wear back in the day, and why did we dress our children this way? And so it's really quite broadly defined as both fashion and just some general clothing material culture. So, so yeah, it's we beyond our fashion classes, we've got a couple of professors in the history department that are interested in women and gender studies, that want to look at some women's dress reform clothing, which was a movement back in the 19th century, or there's a history of children's wear, or history of childhood, I think, in the 19th century. So we do a little segment for them on the clothing that children were wearing at the time. And so yeah, it's real, broad. Plus we get the theater, costume design theater coming in and using it as reference for historic reference of how clothing was made. And, they can really look at the insides and see how the pieces were constructed and see what kinds of fabrics were used. So it's really nice to have that as a resource as well.
I love it. That's a great question. Yeah, I had no idea as well that the department existed, and the breadth and depth of the work there.
Yeah, it's a really, what I love about the clothing is it's something that everyone can relate to, because everybody wears clothes. So really trying to look at how people express themselves and what choices they make and the clothing that they have. And it's real interesting to see too what people save, and what's the emotional connection that you have with this garment. Why did you hang on to this for so long? Or and that's where we can connect to our audiences too when we do exhibits. If we can relate those stories that's connected to this dress, like we did for the university's 150th anniversary, we did this campus fashion exhibit where half of the things we had in the exhibit actually had a history of being worn to college. So we were able to relate those students lives to current students. So to really be able to kind of say, yes, they really did wear clothes like that 150 years ago, or 50 years ago. So yeah, so it's a nice way to connect people to people, past and present. So
I love it. Seeing ourselves through fashion is good. It helps us to recreate memories of our own history. So yeah, it's nice.
yeah, so it's the obvious is usually either the theater design or the clothing design, people to come in and look at the garments that are here. And I think that we have faculty in the history of art department who even looking at Asian art techniques. And so looking at the techniques that are used in textiles, whether they be different dyeing techniques or embroidery or embellishment, there's that kind of thing as well. So there's a nice broad reach into the arts and humanities. And
I remember learning how to do batik, yes. Which is the African printing onto fabric. In my design classes and textiles classes, and learning about the history of how to change the nature of a textile and how it was done in different countries, and how dyes were created out of nothing, and it's very informative. It really takes you back and brings you forward. And,
yeah. Did I not pick a good partner for this, Gayle? What can I say?
That's perfect.
Patting myself on the back.
As you should. So, yeah, I think, so I had a question from from the woman who was doing our podcast, and she was wondering from you guys, how would you like for us to use this dress to represent designers and people of color?
I think definitely in an exhibition.
Yeah.
But I think trying to make it as accessible as possible, and in this time where podcast and digital access, but I think however you make the dress accessible, the story has to be told. And so to show the dress without the story, without a narrative,
right,
I think detracts from the significance of the dress, because it's more than a dress. It's the journey of a Black businesswoman in fashion and design, and there's a lot there. I mean, the things that Linda just brought up and narrated about her journey, that's the story that has to be told. I think her name in the dress is one thing, but the story of her has to accompany that.
Right. Yeah. Putting it in context.
Yeah.
I think one thing too, less than the technical aspects of getting the dress view, in front of as many eyes as we possibly can, whether they're Black or white or any nationality. The dress speaks to the elegance of African Americans that wasn't always told. I know I look at the pictures from my family. I know we all do. I walk into friends of mine, their homes, and sometimes see all these elegant pictures of African American people. But our story, even today, sometimes is still about, well, we just don't have it together some kind of way, or we weren't as upscale, or something to that effect. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but the people I know, there was elegance, and this dress represents the internal elegance of us. We've always been this way, dressing beautifully in our hats on Sunday, and all of, we are an elegant people. And this dress shows that to me. So
Well said. And to your point, Linda, you made me think that picture of Ann Lowe where she's sitting in the chair and she's in this dark dress and she has this hat.
Yes.
I mean, that speaks. That speaks. That does not look like a dressmaker. I mean, that's an artist.
Sophisticate, you know, she's a sophisticate.
Yeah.
When I remember when I was talking with Robin, who did our podcast, that she was talking with one of our graduates, who Nicole Jones, who had gotten her bachelor's degree in fashion here, and that Nicole had actually likened that image of Ann Lowe to one of Chanel. That same caliber of sense of style.
Yeah.
That she personified that style. And yeah, very much, sophisticated in that little black dress, which you can never go wrong with that kind of thing. And yeah, so I thought that was a really good comparison. So.
Yeah, those things all need to be sort of blended together in the portrayal of this woman, her class. It's like this classiness and the struggle underneath it, and to look at her work product today and how classy she is and how classy she would make other women look and feel.
Yeah,
Would just be blown away by the struggle beneath all of that. And to Linda's point, she was born with this. I mean, this is who she is. Yeah.
Yeah, she seemed to, I think she was in business really from the 1920s through the 1960s. And that she, just kept at it and, just found a way to make it work. From Florida up to New York and all the places beginning to end, that she just kept working towards this vision that she had of what she wanted to do. So her determination, to really keep moving in this direction. And I mean, she found out if there were people that didn't think she should do that, including her husband's, she was like, I'm sorry, this is what I am, this is what I'm going to do, and you can't keep me back from doing that. So that really, I think that her resolve in that way too, that she could, and then, she didn't stay in one place, she kept moving forward.
Yeah.
So, there's a very complex person behind this dress. Yeah. So, so there's just getting her real story out there. And I know there've been a couple of books recently, and I think we were going to try and put together a little bit of a reading reference list for people that wanted to learn more about Ann Lowe, could check out some of these recent books about her as well.
Yeah, how would one go about researching or locating other gowns, in this case, Ann gowns, but is there a process that a historian such as yourself goes through to, if you wanted to find another, match, or have, just like a collector, I guess, collectors do that, they search for.
Yeah, I think it's with any collector, you get in touch with the dealers who are out there kind of really hitting all of the hunting grounds. So aligning yourself with someone who can be out there looking for you as you're looking as well, because there are various auction houses that have some of these pieces. And that was one of the things when I was trying to validate this dress and get like what would be a fair market price, kind of looking at previous auction sales to find out. There weren't a lot that were out there. You have to go back a couple of years to try and find one even at auction. But yeah, if it's not something that's already in a museum and you'd like to collect one personally, it's trying to align yourself with a couple of people that really deal in the higher end or vintage clothing markets. So,
Well, ladies, I'm going to have to jump off and onto another Zoom. I feel like I've been zooming my way into outer space this week. But this is a great landing, a great way to land.
I'm so glad we were able to make this happen. And really, really appreciate your guys' involvement and being a part of this. Just knowing that we couldn't do this without the help and philanthropy and sponsorship of donors and collaborators. And so just really am so appreciative of your helping us make this happen. And I'm, so glad that, you're a part of this.
Thank you. I'm sure I'm speaking for Donna too. My honor. This has been an honor.
It has been.
Well, I can't wait till we can really do this in person, and you can see the dress, in person, because video is great, but in person is even better.
Yes. It is, I'm sure. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for sparking this wonderful memory and linkage to history. So thank you.
Yes,
very much. All right.
Gayle, thanks for all your efforts. We really appreciate your hard work. This is quite an undertaking. You are the curator supreme. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Gayle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been my great pleasure. I mean, I'm so happy to, have been able to make this happen.
Well, thank you.
All right, ladies, enjoy the day.
Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too. Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.